You're good.
Good evening. I'd like to call the September 4, 2019 meeting of the University Heights City Council to order. Mrs. Thomas, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Here.
Mr. Wiseman? Mr. Sims?
Here.
Mrs. Pardee?
Here.
Mr. Erdl? Mrs. Cameron? Mrs. Wise?
Here.
Is there a motion to excuse Mr. Wiseman, Mr. Erdl, and Mrs. Cameron?
So moved. Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Okay, they are excused. All those who are able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Is there a motion? Sounds good.
The June 17th, I motion approval of the June 17th minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the June 17, 2019 minutes by Mrs. Pardee. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sims. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Okay, minutes are approved for June 17th. Is there a motion?
For the next one, July 1st.
Motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting of July 1st, 2019 by Mrs. Pardee. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Rock. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Okay, July 1st meeting minutes are approved. Is there a motion?
I don't remember the third date. July,
You know, I read them, July 23?
I read them in another format. July 23rd. Is it 23? Okay, so moved.
Okay.
July 23.
Motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting of July 23rd, 2019 by Mrs. Pardee. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sims. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Okay. Minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is comments from the, that was all, oh, is there one? Oh, I'm sorry, there is one more, you're right. Okay, yes. Is there a motion?
August 1st.
Is it August 1st? Does anyone have any corrections?
Which meeting is it?
When we appointed
The equalization board?
Yeah, we
That
did
was,
the
that was
equalization
it, that was all we did. So moved, August 1st.
Second.
Steve, you were there.
I would make.
Okay, motion to approve the August 1st, 2019 special meeting minutes by Mrs. Pardee, second by Mr. Sims. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
As you can see, while we're on break, we had a lot of special meetings. We were very busy this summer. So, motion carries, and minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is comments from the audience. Speakers are limited to 5 minutes. Total time allowed 15 minutes per meeting unless otherwise permitted by Council Ordinance Number 91-25. Is there anybody here who would care to address the city this evening? And if yes, please come on up to the podium. Please speak into the microphone so you can be recorded. Please state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is reports and communications from the mayor and the taking of action. So, what did you do last summer? Well, this past summer. We had 8 concerts, we had 2 movies, we had Tuesday yoga in the park, we had food trucks, and that was all at Walter Stinson Community Park, although we did have 2 concerts at John Kirk. And then, among our concerts, Carlos Jones and the Plus Band, that drew a crowd of over 1,000. We had a full season of activities at Purvis Park, including swimming and swimming lessons and swimming team, and tennis lessons and tennis team, and pickleball and arts and crafts, and touch a truck. And we participated in Safety Town. We had community block parties, 16 so far and 6 to go, and it's not too late to sign up your block. And while we've been on a legislative break officially, we have continued our work to make University Heights a better place to live, work, play, and raise a family. We've had 3 special meetings over the summer, plus a retreat meeting to examine the goals that we achieved working together and reassess the remaining goals as well as set a few new ones. June 24th, we had a joint meeting with Cleveland Heights City Government and the CHUH School District to discuss issues of common concern, including the issue of the bus depot. Happy to report that the City of Cleveland Heights approved keeping the buses on Mayfield Road for an additional 3 years while we sort out this issue in conjunction with working with our school district on the future of the former Wiley Middle School property. We'd also like to note that on September 23rd, the 4th Monday of this month, we will be having another joint meeting, this time with the Cleveland Heights City Government, the CHUH School District, as well as the CHUH libraries, Heights Libraries. So that will be at Heights High School in the cafeteria at 6:30 p.m. Agenda to be set. In late June, I went to Washington, D.C. for the Empowering Local Leadership Conference, organized by the Greater Cleveland Partnership of the Northeastern Ohio Mayors and Managers Association. I met with members of the Ohio Congressional Delegation, had a White House briefing, and attended keynote conference sessions scheduled with the Speaker of the House, the Director of White House Opportunity and Revitalization Council, the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, and the Director of the Office of Wastewater Management of the EPA. I spoke with wastewater director Andrew Sawyers about the demands that NEORSD and EPA are making on University Heights regarding our aging sewer infrastructure, and emphasized to Mr. Sawyers that clean water and a clean Lake Erie is everyone's priority, a national priority, and that the cost of infrastructure improvements in our city meant to improve clean water must have federal funding. This is hardly an exhaustive list, and as you can see from our agenda tonight, our city has been working tirelessly this entire summer on the special assessment process. This has consumed much of the attention of our finance director, our law director, our clerk of council, as well as the attention of all of your elected officials. Finally, I want to extend a welcome to our presumed new council members-elect, Barbara Blankfeld and Justin Gould, who are both here with us tonight. Wave for anyone who doesn't know you, which I think most of you do. While others did pull or even file petitions, 4 candidates qualified for 4 seats on council, and absent some disqualifying occurrence or change of heart, which better not happen, we know who will be elected to council come November. So with that in mind, absent a reason otherwise, going forward until their formal swearing in, it's my intention, our intention, I think, to generally be inviting Ms. Blankfeld and Mr. Gould to our executive sessions so that they can begin to become acclimated to city business. I want to congratulate council members Michelle Weiss and John Rock on their presumed re-election as well, as well as thank them both for their ongoing dedication and service to our community. And finally, I want to thank our outgoing council members, Steve Sims and Pam Cameron, for their dedication and service to our community. I will miss your perspectives on this council. That concludes my report. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item A, Resolution 2019-43, recognizing Stormwater Week. It says October 20th through 26th, but that would be September 13th through September 22nd, 2019. This is introduced jointly by Vice Mayor Susan D. Hardy as well. Oh, right, I'm sorry, you're right, I'm looking at the wrong thing, thank you. Thank you, that may in fact be. Okay. You're right, all right, thank you, sorry, thank you for the clarification there. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is still 2019-43, recognizing Stormwater Week, being October 20th through 26th, 2019. And this is introduced by me. Now, the Cuyahoga Soil and Water Conservation District has asked our community as well as other communities if we would join them in recognizing the week of October 20th through 26th, 2019 as Stormwater Awareness Week, so that promote awareness of the effect of water quality by runoff and by other unfortunate dumping or items entering the stormwater supply. And this is something that I think we all saw the news recently over the weekend of someone, I'll say allegedly, but the blue material coming down the side of the cliff is pretty telling. In Rocky River, of a contractor allegedly pouring a blue substance down the side of a cliff into the Rocky River. That's the sort of thing we cannot have just going into our water supply. And whether we're talking something like that, or we're talking fertilizer runoff, or we're talking about somebody dumping grease where it doesn't belong, or anything like that, we want to join with the NEORST in promoting awareness, and that's what this resolution is about. Is there any question or comment? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Weiss, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Stearns. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mrs. Simmons?
Aye.
Mrs. Cuddy?
Aye.
Mrs. West?
Aye.
Very good. The resolution carries. Next item is Resolution 2019-44. Now, recognizing the National Welcoming Week of September 13th through September 22nd. And this is introduced by jointly Vice Mayor Sue Hardy as well as me. So I feel like this is something that would just be better read out loud, so I'm just going to jump right in and do it if there's no objection. Recognizing the National Welcoming Week of September 13th through September 22nd, 2019. Whereas this council proudly recognizes the National Event Welcoming Week, September 13th through September 22nd, 2019. And whereas this will be a special week with a series of events hosted by Global Cleveland that will bring communities together to celebrate their unity and strong connection with each other and applaud the benefits of welcoming newcomers to our community. And whereas Global Cleveland will begin the week with their Welcoming the World campaign, an exciting and fun way to showcase Cleveland and the surrounding area as global-friendly cities. This campaign will debut September 13th and last for 1 month, and whereas through Welcoming the World, global-friendly corporations and organizations share their global story through decals on their windows, floors, elevators, etc. These will showcase the company or organization as a diverse, inclusive, and global-friendly employer to the world, and whereas it is important to recognize the efforts of newcomers in Ohio because it is part of our present and an important part of our past. And whereas Ohio has thrived because of international newcomers, the population decline of northeastern Ohio from 1970 to 2013 has been mitigated by the continuous influx of foreign-born persons who have helped Ohio to grow and develop. And whereas most international newcomers have a bachelor's degree or higher, the Migration Policy Institute found that in 2017 that 49.5% of the foreign-born workers have a higher education degree as compared with 33.1% of the native-born population. And whereas the spending power of refugees and immigrants are in the billions, which significantly outweighs the cost of public services they incur. And whereas according to the New American Economy, immigrant households in Cleveland have a $3.1 billion in spending power, and refugee households have $819 million in spending power. These households also contribute to our federal, state, and local tax bases each year. And whereas international students have financially contributed over $1.1 billion in 2018 to the state's economy, making Ohio the 8th most benefited state by foreign students. International students are required to pay full tuition, which is 3 times as much on average as a local student, and they are not eligible for financial aid. The economic benefit is very clear, and these students also help support jobs which require their unique skills and higher education degrees. And whereas according to the National Association of Foreign Student Advisors in 2018, international students in Ohio helped support over 14,000 jobs, and the state was able to bring about 1/3 of the international students post-graduation. And whereas Cleveland has a plethora of institutions, organizations, and companies that work together to integrate newcomers, and whereas with ample support from the City of Cleveland and other institutions, Cleveland now has more than 31 cultural gardens designed and cultivated by distinct cultural or nationality groups. Cleveland Cultural Gardens represent the diversity and multiculturalism in Cleveland and holds a mission of peace through mutual understanding. This has helped people living in Cleveland become interculturally competent, unprejudiced, and more welcoming towards international newcomers. This benefits the city and the state through the impact these newcomers have socially, economically, and culturally. And whereas as we continue with these efforts, we can continue to transform Cleveland into an international hub of innovation. We can embrace and cultivate a culture of inclusion and shared prosperity, and we can create a platform for internationalization and economic growth. And whereas Global Cleveland's Welcoming the World campaign plays a huge part in continuing momentum built around shared prosperity in our society, community, city, and state. And whereas through these efforts, Global Cleveland proceeds with its mission to attract, welcome, and connect international newcomers to economic and social opportunities in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. We are strengthening our communities by becoming our world. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the city of University Heights joins the Global Cleveland in recognizing the week of September 13 through September 22, 2019 as National Welcoming Week. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mayor.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mayor, I'd like to say something.
Please.
I've had the privilege of sitting at the table with the Refugee Services Collaborative for the last several years and witnessing the work that they've done. I've worked with Us Together in partnership with the schools, which is the resettlement agency that until recently had offices in the Rockefeller Building at Lee and Mayfield. Our school district right here, Cleveland Heights University Heights, has been home to anywhere from 70 to over 100 refugee students, not immigrant, refugee students at any one time. And we've learned a lot about what the people who come to our country's shores go through to get here. We hear from the adults who are our age but grew up in refugee camps, never having seen freedom until they got here. So I am proud that our community has so many peoples of different kinds and nationalities, and I'm proud that we're sponsoring and supporting this welcoming legislation. It's very clear there's a lot of research about the economic benefit, the social benefit, all the benefits of welcoming refugees and immigrants into our society. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Berge.
Mayor.
Mr. Sims.
Thank you. I think it's a great piece of legislation or resolution. I'm not familiar with Global Cleveland. Who are they?
It's an organization that is being led by former Cleveland City Councilman Joseph Simon. And his former council assembly contacted our city with respect to their interest in having us join them by passing this resolution. Yes, Mrs. Bell.
Add one more thing that I neglected to add. This is still necessary. I don't know if anyone saw in the news the fact that a garden was dug up over in the Noble neighborhood. This was a garden that was built by students of Cleveland Heights University Heights through an after-school program in collaboration with Nepali refugees, specifically because the Nepali can't always get the fresh kinds of vegetables that they like to cook with. So the idea, and Cleveland Heights was very supportive, was to create this lot and make it into a garden that the Nepali community could take part in and own. Noble Neighbors was responsible for it. And Cleveland Heights University Heights personnel and students built the gardens over the course of the summer. this was vandalized recently and the vegetables pulled up. So we can see how necessary it is still to put our voices behind this. So again, I want to say thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Craig. Is there anything further? Seeing no further discussion, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Woods?
Aye.
Resolution passes. Just as a bit of business, before we leave this evening, the folks at Global Cleveland asked that a photo be taken of us signing the resolution. So let's make sure we do that before this evening's. Next item on the agenda is item C, motion to authorize the city to seek bids for the 2019-1 citywide fall planting contract. Mr. Picorni, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. The item before you is the continuation of our annual tree planting. The planting this year being proposed will be in the zone that we did pruning last year, which is the southwestern part of the city. We'll be planting about 123 to 130 trees. We're looking for authorization to go ahead and bid the planting of those trees, and we're estimating that the cost would be around $44,000.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Picorni. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Picorni? We're going to get rid of all the Bradford pears, right? Yeah.
No.
All right, well, we'll work on it. All right.
What's wrong with the Bradford pears?
Well, they've been determined to be an invasive species. And there are some who have suggested that they should all be taken.
They will become more difficult to purchase because they are invasive
Well,
species.
I hope we're not planting anymore.
There might be one or two in here, I think.
I'll just talk.
What is invasive? What does that mean?
The Bradford pear originated from China, doesn't really belong on this continent. And while it was initially thought to be sterile and would not produce additional Bradford pears, in fact, it does interbreed with other plants that tend to create a thorny kind of weed that you don't really want around University Heights or anywhere else in North America. So it's been recommended by some that we should just get rid of it. They also smell fun. Yes.
We recently received funding to support trees in their early growth period. Will these trees be able to be part of that?
They will not. They will be too young. They'll be coming from nurseries. These trees will be planted, and in about 2 years will be ready for that type of a pruning and attention. We have not received the answer yet on that grant that we applied for, but I will let you know when we do.
And that then would be for trees that are 2 years or older?
Correct.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to authorize the city to seek bids for the 2019 citywide fall planting contract.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Pardee. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Sims. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Woods?
Aye.
Very good.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Next item is item D, Resolution 2019-45, accepting the amounts and rates determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county fiscal officer. Yes, Mr. Goff.
This is the next step in the process of improving our property tax levies for next year. It started with our alternative tax budget back in July, from which the county then determined these are the rates that we're eligible to use on our property taxes for millage, and it's the council's opportunity to approve those recommendations from budget.
Mr. Goff, is there a microphone by you?
I do not believe so.
Okay, can we move the microphone over by him, because for purposes of the records, we're going to need having the mic. Great, thank you. All right.
Do you want me to repeat that or no?
You better. Thank you.
So these are the rates and amounts that are recommended by the County Budget Commission, having started the property tax process with our alternative tax budget back in July. they then, reviewing our tax budget, make a recommendation of millage amounts that we can approve up to. And it's now council's opportunity to approve those so that the county will assess those next year.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Gott. Are there any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Roth. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Weiss.
Can I just confirm one thing?
Yes, Mrs. Carter, you have the floor.
To the finance director, there's been no change in any of the amounts or rates.
For property taxes, no changes.
Correct. Just want to confirm that, no change whatsoever. So we're approving something that's been in place for some time.
Yes, I believe the last change to our property taxes would have been the voter-approved levy for the park general obligation bond. I believe that was used for acquiring what's now Walter Stinson Park.
Thank you.
Yes, improving. Very good. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Gott.
you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Ms. Rock?
Aye.
Ms. Wise? I'm sorry, Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Cuddy?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Very good. Resolution carries. Next is item E, just parenthetically, items E through K are all related, but we'll still, as a matter of course, take them one at a time. Item E is the motion to accept the following assessment equalization board rulings. Subpart 1, hearing on objection, Rena Greenfeld, 2549 Lafayette Drive, parcel 721-27-084. Subpart 2, hearing on objection, Kim Lisboa, Silsby Center, 2257 through 2261 Warrensville Center Road, permanent parcel number 721-02-070. Subpart 3, hearing on objection, Kim Lisboa, Silsby Center, 2267 Warrensville Center Road, permanent parcel number 721-02-071. Subpart 4, hearing on objection, Kim Lisboa, Silsby Center, 2249 Warrensville Center Road, permanent parcel number 721-02-069. Subpart 5, hearing on objection, Kathleen C. Hopkins, Green Road Animal Hospital, 2168 South Green Road, 721-18-001. Hearing on objection,
Yeah, I believe, Mayor, I believe you're looking for Rock on Cleveland Opportunity Fund to
Rock on
LLC.
Cleveland Opportunity. Yes, okay. Yes, differently than printed, hearing on objection, Ned J. Wasserstein, Rock on Cleveland Opportunity Fund 2 LLC, 14077 Cedar Road, permanent parcel number 721-01-144, and then subpart 7, hearing on objections, John Carroll University. Yes, please. Mr. McConville, you
Just to clarify for the record and for council members, and let's just go one by one. With respect to the objection of Ms. Greenfeld, she was objecting to, I believe it was the street lighting ordinance.
Correct.
2019-39, in which there was a typographical error transposing, well, the way it read was 70 cents, parentheses, 80 cents. And there was testimony at that hearing that the intent was to assess at 80 cents and that the rest of the math, in terms of the overall assessment, used that figure, and the equalization board adopted the 80-cent rate. On items 2 through 6, In each case, the objection was to the 2,000 square foot measure for calculating the sewer base units on commercial properties. And in each case, the equalization board voted to approve the assessment as levied in ordinance 2019-37 and approved that 2,000 square foot base unit. And then with respect to the hearing on objections by John Carroll, an agreement was presented to the board members that had been negotiated between the administration and John Carroll. That agreement had 4 components. It indicates that commercial properties that are owned by John Carroll will be assessed at the 2,000 square foot measure as other commercial properties will be throughout the city. Buildings that are considered campus properties will be assessed at the 6,000 square foot measure that has been the historical measure for sewer base units. Properties that are used as residences will be assessed at the same rate as all other residences, single-family residences within the city, and that's at a single base unit. And then lastly, apartment buildings or multifamily units will be assessed at the rates that other multifamily units and apartment buildings are assessed throughout the city. And the board voted to approve the recommendations, or to approve that agreement. I'll entertain any questions. Those are the findings that were made by the equalization board that we're first going to ask you to approve by motion, and then subsequently you'll be approving those in the ordinances following.
Very good, thank you, Mr. McConville. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. McConville? Mrs. Weiss?
I have a question. I basically just have a comment. I was in the audience during the equalization board, and I was actually very impressed with how they dealt with it on short notice and very professional, so I think it went well.
Mayor?
Yes, Mrs.
I wanted to make the same comment. I was in the audience and I was very impressed with the caliber of person that we found to represent us. I thought they were thoughtful and very clear thinking, because it would be easy to get lost in the arguments, but there was great clarity of thought in what they were doing, and they were very purposeful. So I was impressed and very grateful that they were our equalization board candidates. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would also want to reiterate that and thank our members of council for helping us find the good people that we had. I think there's mentioned by name that we had Paul Gaffney of Cleveland Heights, Matthew Orhack of the city of Cleveland, and Eliza Feldman of Beechwood, who all volunteered. And you know, one of the things that's especially notable is that the 3 of them don't live in University Heights, and because of the nature of these particular assessments, in order to find people who are disinterested, we had to look outside of our city. And all 3 of them were kind enough to lend us their time and attention, just for the good of the greater community, even though they don't live here. So that's greatly appreciated by the city. All right. As far as how we take these, should we take each subpart individually?
I would prefer that.
That would make sense. Is there a motion with regard to subpart 1 of item E?
So moved.
Second.
Would that be a motion to accept?
To accept,
Each should be a
following
motion to
assessment.
accept the recommendation of the equalization board.
Okay, so with regard to subpart 1, we have a motion to accept the recommendation of the equalization board by Mrs. Hardy, second by Mrs. Weiss. Is that right? Okay, very good. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I just would ask that the minutes, specifically reflect both the objection and the ruling, because from the face of the agenda, that's not clear. So I just want to make sure that our minutes reflect that information.
I'm sorry, I don't know if I follow. What is the clarification? Did you get that, Kelly? Okay, all right.
There's no clarification. It's a request that the minutes reflect the objection that was made
Oh, okay.
and the ruling of the equalization board.
Okay. And yes, the clerk has indicated that she can do that, so then it will be so. All right. Mr. Roth?
Also, Mayor, when I was in the audience, I heard that it was requested that we clarify the correct rate. And do we need to do that by motion to clarify the rate? How, or is that just going to be reflected in the minutes?
That's in the coming ordinances.
Okay, so that'll be later in the meeting. Okay. Very good. Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Roth. Right. Anything further on the motion on the floor with regard to subpart 1? There is nothing further to, yeah, if there's nothing further, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. We move on now to subpart 2. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Again, just to clarify with the record, it's a motion to accept the recommendation of the equalization board.
Very good. So we have that motion by Mrs. Weiss and a second by Mrs. Pardee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
That brings us then to subpart 3. Is there a motion?
So moved to accept the recommendation of the equalization board.
Thank you.
There it is.
Is there a
Second.
Second by Mr. Rock. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is item 4, subpart 4. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to accept the findings of the equalization board and recommendation of the equalization board.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Rock. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Pardee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Very good, motion carries. Next is subpart 5. Mr. Sims, is it your turn?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to accept the ruling of the equalization board.
Okay, we have a motion by Mrs. Pardee. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that's subpart 5. This is, if there's no, is there any discussion? Okay, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is subpart 6. Is there a motion?
So moved to accept the recommendation of the equalization board.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Weiss, second by Mrs. Pardee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is subpart 7. Is there a motion?
A motion to accept the assessment equalization board ruling, hearing on objections, John Carroll University.
Okay. There's a motion by Mrs. Pardee. Is there a second?
Second.
Should there be any reference here to the agreement that was recommended to be accepted, or is it suffice it to state that that's part of the recommendation?
I think we just made it part of the recommendation.
Okay, very good.
Will it be reflected in the minutes?
Correct.
That too.
And the agreement is attached to the coming ordinance, so you'll be approving that ordinance.
Very good, thank you, Mr. McConville. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Wise?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Next, I'd like to take an item out of order. I'd like to move on to item N.
Let's do that by motion.
If we could do that by motion. Is there a motion to hear item N out of order from the rest of the agenda? So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Sims, second by Mrs. Pardee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Okay, very good. We are now on item N, which is a motion to accept the BWC Safety Intervention Grant of $17,925.75 with a total grant project of $23,901, which includes the city's required match of $5,975.25 for the purchase of updated turnout gear, washer, extractor, and dryer. Chief Perko, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. This was brought to you in June for approval on the application. Fortunately, we were able to be awarded it quickly here. This is to meet the standards for laundering our personal protective gear for firefighting. Our current laundry machine is 20 years old and does not meet the standards required today for bloodborne pathogens and cancer law with Ohio in regards to washing, and we do not currently have a dryer for the gear. So the grant was an awarded amount of $23,901, and our match will be $5,975.25.
Very good. Thank you, Chief Perko. Are there any questions for Chief Perko?
Congratulations and thank you for going after external funding yet again.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank Captain Boylan for his assistance with this. He did a lot of work on it.
Great, thank you.
Very good. Is there any discussion?
I'll move that we accept the BWC Safety Intervention Grant of $17,925.75.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Rock. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Sims.
If we could just note for the record that it includes a match by the city of $5,975.25.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I would like to include that in my motion, that it includes the city's required match of $5,975.25 for purchase.
And Mr. Sims, you still second? Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, we call the roll.
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Okay, very good. We have exhausted for the time being the items that are on the agenda that will not be heard on emergency. We have 4 out of 7 present. There are 1 or possibly 2 that we are expecting at some point this evening, but we will need at least 1 of them present before we can consider consider legislation on emergency, as it does require 5 to suspend the rules. So it's my suggestion at this time that we entertain a motion to move beyond the regular agenda items and switch over to directors' reports and hear those while we await 1 or more of the remaining council members to join us. Mrs. Pardee.
Mayor, can we add council reports to that also?
Yes.
So do Directors and council reports.
Yes, that's a fine idea. Thank you.
And just let's do that by motion.
Yes.
Well, I will move that we move directors and council reports forward on the agenda in front of
Items F through, okay,
in front of items F through
oh,
K.
F through M.
F through M.
F through M.
Second.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Pardee, second by Mrs. Weiss. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Thomas, will you call the roll?
Mr. Rock?
Aye.
Mr. Sims?
Aye.
Mrs. Pardee?
Aye.
Mrs. Weiss?
Aye.
Okay, we are now on to director's reports. Finance.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Goff.
August 28th, we held the exit conference for the audit for the 2018 financial statements. I'd like to thank Councilman Weiss for being able to attend the exit conference. The auditors have submitted that down to the Auditor of State's office, and once it's approved through them, it should be released. I know last year we had a waiting period because they won't release anything 2 weeks before and after a election. I don't see that being an issue this year. So whenever the Auditor of State's office is done is when it should be released. Also, August 28th, I sent to council a financial packet that included financial reports that were as of August 28th. It included statement of cash position, bank report, budget versus actual for revenue that summarized those revenues into various different categories, primarily focused on items that were probably of higher interest in terms of revenue sources. Budget versus actual for expenses that summarized those expenses at the level that the appropriations were passed. It also contained the July 5th, 3rd security holdings report, which showed what investments we hold at 5th, 3rd securities as of the end of July. And it contained a list of changes that I made to the estimated resources, which would be changes of what the expected revenues are, as well as a brief summary of our first supplement to appropriations to remind you of what those had been. I was shooting to get you one for all of August out today. That hasn't happened, so I expect to have that out tomorrow, and I'm waiting right now for 5th, 3rd for the August report, so hopefully I'll have that tomorrow as well. Moving on to some other items. Next week we have our quarterly NORMA meeting. That is our Risk Management Association for insurance. I expect to be getting information about our insurance renewal rate at that meeting. Next week, Finance Department will be closed Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for the finance staff to attend a user group training for our VIP accounting system. And right now, I'm in work in preparation for a couple of items. The draft budget, focusing at this point on primarily safety forces for the upcoming Finance Committee meetings, as well as preparing any other changes we need to the current year budget. You do have appropriations before you for a few items, but it'll be likely another appropriations ordinance coming either at the next Finance Committee meeting or at the next council meeting. And then the last item is special assessments, assuming all the legislation is appropriately passed later this evening, are due to be filed by Monday with the county. So unless there are any questions, that is the remainder of my report for tonight.
So the deadline for that filing is September 9th?
September 9th.
Thank you.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Goff? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Goff. Next report is Mr. McConville, Director of Law.
I have no report this evening, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. McConville. Next, Public Safety. We'll start with Police. Chief Dustin Rogers, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I'll report on 3 items this evening. First is related to personnel. Hiring and promoting is still ongoing. Next item to report on is related to community engagement. At this time, our Office of Community Policing has begun to attempt to schedule our first ever Shop with a Cop event. We'll also be attempting to coordinate with the Fire Department, Chief Perko as well on that, and with the school system to help place candidates to shop with us, and it'll likely be done around the first week of December. Also, we have Coffee with a Cop planned for this fall as well. I'll provide more information details when that becomes available. Moving on to the final item is related to prisoner housing services. I'll be sending out some information by the end of this week relating to our current situation with Solon Jail and our prisoner housing services. There'll be much more detailed in the report.
Okay, thank you, Chief Rogers. Any questions for the Chief?
Chief, do you think we would need a safety committee meeting to discuss the findings of your jail report?
I guess I would leave that up to you. I know at multiple other committee meetings we've discussed this topic where a regional jail services assessment was presented with some findings. Our perspective has not changed since then, but again, all that will be represented in the information that's provided to refresh the topic.
Thank you. Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Rock. Thank you, Chief Rogers. Any further? Mrs. Flanks.
Just one quick question. Thank you, Chief. Are the signs over here going to be changed because it's not a school anymore?
We were kind of holding back until we had confirmation that it wouldn't be used for any type of school service or program at this location, because there would be certain type of requirements that could require those type of signage. Again, we don't want to start deconstructing that signage due to the cost and the maintenance, or I'm sorry, the labor that would be required until we, again, nothing has been forwarded to me that there is no actual intended, any possible type of school use at this time.
I'm just thinking, you know, when you turn on from Cedar, it says no turn on red from 7. I don't know. I'm just thinking so you just want to hold off on everything right now?
That was the original plan, until we have confirmation.
No one would get ticketed now if they happen to not.
It's well known that at this time, the school is not being utilized for school services at this time. But we can look into expediting some of those circumstances in the meantime.
I mean, for that matter, I believe the intersection of Warrensville and Cedar is a no-turn on red heading northbound from University Heights for the same reason, the reason that Wiley is a school. Correct. Traffic study was premised on it being part of a route to go to school there. It may also be worth re-examining whether that must remain a no-turn on red.
Correct.
Thank you. Any further questions for Chief Rogers? Seeing none, thank you, Chief Rogers. Public Safety, Fire, Chief Perka.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to let everyone know that the month of September is National Preparedness Month. Our social media will be rolling out different websites and literature information from FEMA. Each week is broken down into a separate topic. So this week, the first week is on saving and planning for disaster costs. And then each subsequent week, we'll have information provided by FEMA. Update on our new hires. We swore in 3 of the 4 pending new hires a couple weeks ago. They're currently doing their 40-hour orientation, and they'll be assigned to a shift next week. And the 4th one, we have a conditional offer on. We're just waiting some finish-up work, and hopefully we'll have that person starting in a week or so. Last piece of information, the fire department will be doing hydrant flushing in the month of September. We're looking to start probably on the 16th of the month, and there'll be information on our website and social media regarding that as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Chief Perka. Anybody have any questions for Chief Perka? Okay, seeing none. We then move on to service. Mr. Corney.
Thank you, Mayor. Only 2 items to report on tonight. First is the tree pruning removal project, which we're working on. That will be performed in the northeast section of town this year, which is Bane Tree from Silsby up to South Green Road, and the southern portion of it will be Washington, East Carroll Boulevard up to South Green Road. So everything in between those 2 streets in that section of town. I hope to have the list together for you by next council meeting for authorization to go out to bid. Second item is our solid waste study. Has been completed in draft form by GT Environmental, our consultant working on that study, and hopefully we'll be getting together with the Service and Utilities Committee shortly to discuss that study and its findings. And I believe that should be scheduled sometime in the next month, right?
Yes, I believe some dates have been circulated by Mrs. Thomas, and the date should be settled on here shortly if it hasn't actually been.
Good.
Very good.
And that is my report.
Thank you, Mr. Corney. Any questions for Mr. Corney? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is the building commissioner. The most interesting building commissioner in the world, James McGrath.
Why, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Good evening. Wish to report that Inspector Jason Monaco has passed the test for commercial plumbing. He also has passed the test for residential plumbing. He's currently under a trainee program, which could last as long as 4 years. He is now currently petitioning the Board of Building Standards to speed up that process. And I think with my recommendation, I'm hoping that he'll be accepted and that he can do that in about half of that time. Inspector Rob Brown is teaching a class November 18th, a 3-hour class for the Building Officials Conference of Northeast Ohio. And this is going to be on updates to the Ohio Plumbing Code. The Belfair project, Building G as we call it, is nearing completion. It's on schedule and should be completed by the end of September. At the beginning of November, they're expecting to go through testing with state and federal agencies and hopefully start moving in residents in December. The McVon Green Road is also nearing completion. Their completion date is tentatively the beginning of November. Board of Zoning Appeals is scheduled to meet next Wednesday, September 11th. Architectural Review Board is scheduled for next Thursday morning, September 12th. You may have noticed that a certificate of occupancy was recently given to the Sauce new store on Cedar Road, and it seems to be doing quite well. We've seen lines coming out the door and going around the side of the building, so kudos to our new business.
Yes, 7:30 last night, I saw a line out the door across the parking lot.
Wish they all were like that when they opened up. And finally, a permit report, a permit fee report for August and July. August of this year, we took in a total of $16,092.93 between residential and commercial fees. Of that amount, $10,921 were residential fees and $4,867 were commercial fees. In July of this year, our total income on permit fees was $32,009.07. Of that amount, $12,118 were residential fees, $19,886 were commercial fees. And this compares favorably with periods last year. This year in August, we had a total of $16,092. Last year in August, we had a total of $13,708. In July of this year, we had a total of $32,009, and in July of last year, we had a total of $23,451. So things are looking up. Any questions?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. McReynolds. Are there questions? Mrs. Pardee.
Thank you for the update on the fees that have come in. Could you send even just an email that lists those fees and amounts that you just told us?
Yes, they're broken down into residential, commercial categories, and then by, you could say discipline. For example, building, concrete, electrical, etc.
That would be really great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. McReynolds. Next up is our city engineer, Mr. Cheney.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Update on some construction projects. We're nearing the completion of the mid-block crossing and the bike lanes on Warrensville Center Road. We're into punch-out items for the contractor to complete. We have also, since we do have the bike lanes now, we decided to replace a number of the catch basins that were collapsing, and Fabrizi is doing that for us on a separate contract, and hopefully we'll get done with that shortly, and then it'll be a lot smoother in that curb lane, for our bikes. The Washington Boulevard water line replacement project from Staunton to Wynn. The water main is in the ground. It is currently flushing and chlorinating. It has to pass the proper samples. Cleveland Water is in charge of that. They take tests, they sample it. You have to pass 2 in a row, and then we can hook up the houses because it's safe for drinking. It hasn't passed the samples yet, so we haven't started hooking up any of the houses. It should happen shortly.
Finally, we began the Groveland resurfacing project. That was Groveland, we did the water line last year between Milton and Green. It was ground down today, and I want to report that the brick underneath the asphalt looks beautiful. But we're not going to keep the brick, we're going to cover it again with asphalt.
Really hard to skateboard on that brick.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it didn't look as bad as I thought it was going to, but we do have curb repair and some pavement repairs to do. That project will be very short, less than a month to repave and to report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cheney. Are there any questions, Mrs. Weiss?
Yeah, thank you. A few residents called me about Churchill, that there's a sign that it's getting repaved.
That's that's a standard sign. What we're going to be doing there is, we repaved Churchill 5 years ago, maybe.
That's what I
It wasn't that long ago. There's a very flat spot in Churchill where it just doesn't drain the water ponds. That we're actually adding catch basins on each side of the street. Additional catch basins are one that are already there. And that's a standard sign because Shelley Contracting is a paving contractor, so that's the one they always put out there. Paving will begin, no parking. It's basically to keep them from parking so that they can work in that one, and it's in a very short area, as you see. I told them today to go out there and cover up the thing that says repaving and just put construction. But they still need to know parking, so they have room for their equipment to get in there and put those catch basins in. And they're basically across the street from each other where they're adding them. And again, it's a very flat spot, but it just doesn't drain. So. But sorry for the confusion. The mayor did bring that up last week, and I drove there this morning. They were still up there, and they're going to be doing the old magic marker and crossing it out. It's a standard sign that they use.
People in Churchill, calling us saying, where's the repavement we were supposed to begin? And the thing is the road's in pretty good shape, except for that spot that doesn't drain right. And we have gotten calls about that, and I'm glad that we're going to be fixing it. So hopefully that will alleviate any confusion
Yes.
over what we're actually doing. We're happy to. Okay. Mr. Sims?
Yes, I have a question. I don't think our engineer can answer this question, but with the new bike lane that went in,
Yes.
is there any kind of state law or anything that speaks to how bikers have to navigate on the streets? And the question really is, I was in Moreland Hills, or I was in Pepper Pike, or one of those communities out near county line, and they have a sign that says single file, and I think that would be important on Warrenfield Center Road in particular. And I just wanted to know, can we put up signs of some sort, and whether it would require legislation by council to require single file?
Well, if we wanted to consider single file, and I'm sure Mr. McConville can expound on this, that would be a separate ordinance above and beyond what the Ohio Revised Code requires. In the Ohio Revised Code, bicyclists are allowed to ride two abreast.
Yep.
On our roads.
And I believe that, that's considered to be a matter of statewide concern and not an area that we are permitted to regulate under our home rule powers. I'm pretty sure that's right. Maybe Mr. Matty.
No, Luke, you're right on point.
Yep.
He'll send us his.
Oh, I can't do that very hard.
Yeah, thank you, please don't.
I have seen that sign, Mr. Sims. I believe it's on Chagrin River Road.
Yes.
Because it is very narrow there, and I'm not sure if it's Moreland Hills and Hunting Valley, if they'd actually pass something to put that sign up, but it is. Yeah, it does exist. I've seen it myself.
I have a photo.
Yeah. But I know Chagrin River, it winds through there, and it's a lot of bicyclists, and and it's very narrow.
Well, I'm
There's
more
actually not a
concerned
bike
about
lane
the
there.
safety of the bike, of the
Yeah.
cyclists. I don't care if they ride single file or not, but it just seems like it would be safer if they did, especially on one.
That works for me. Okay. Well, first thing that popped up was a network threat locked.
Uh-oh.
This wasn't my choice.
That does not sound good.
Hey, you want to go back to the last time?
What was that? Yeah. Previous meetings.
These guys have actually. Actually, he's finishing up probably this next week. He had,